Yuki Tanaka had never heard Michael Jackson's voice, never heard Billie Jean or Thriller or any of the songs that made him the king of pop. She was born completely deaf. Her world existed in absolute silence. But on June 26, 1993, sitting in the VIP section of the Tokyo Dome with her hands pressed flat against the metal railing, Yuki was experiencing Michael Jackson's concert in a way that 55,000 hearing fans never could. She felt it. Every bass note sent vibrations through the stadium floor and up through her body. Every drum beat created pressure waves she could sense in her chest. The massive speakers weren't making sound for Yuki. They were creating physical energy, rhythmic pulses, patterns of vibration that told a story her ears couldn't translate. But her body understood perfectly. While everyone around her screamed and sang, Yuki stood in silence, swaying, moving, dancing to frequencies only she could perceive. That's when Michael saw her. That's when he stopped singing mid-song and did something that would shock his security team, confuse his band, and create the most powerful 8 minutes of performance art anyone in that stadium had ever witnessed. He was about to prove that music isn't just sound, it's connection, it's communication, it's a language that transcends hearing. And Yuki Tanaka, who lived in a world of complete silence, was about to teach 55,000 people what music really means. To understand why what happened was so extraordinary, you need to understand Yuki's world. A world where music existed, not as sound, but as pure physical sensation. Yuki Tanaka was born on March 15, 1981, in Tokyo, Japan. The doctors diagnosed her condition within days. Profound congenital deafness, complete, bilateral, permanent. There would be no surgeries, no hearing aids that could restore what had never existed. Yuki would live her entire life in absolute silence. Her father couldn't accept it. When Yuki was 3 years old, he left, unable to cope with having a daughter he considered broken. Her mother, Keiko, an elementary school teacher, raised Yuki alone, determined that her daughter's deafness would not define her limitations, only her unique way of experiencing the world. Keiko taught Yuki Japanese Sign Language. She enrolled her in schools that celebrated deaf culture, rather than treating it as a disability. And most importantly, she never let Yuki believe that being deaf meant being disconnected from the world. But Yuki discovered something her mother hadn't anticipated. At age 7, while visiting a friend's house, Yuki felt something strange coming from the television. Her friend's older brother was watching a Michael Jackson concert video, with the volume turned up loud. Yuki couldn't hear the music, but she could feel it. She walked over to the speaker and placed her small hand against it. The vibrations traveled through her palm, up her arm, into her chest. Low frequencies, bass notes, created rhythmic pulses that her body could detect, even though her ears couldn't process them as sound. It wasn't hearing, it was something else entirely. It was feeling music as physical sensation. From that day forward, Yuki became obsessed with Michael Jackson. Not with his voice, she would never hear that, but with his movement, his dance, the way his body became an extension of rhythm. She would watch his videos over and over, with Japanese subtitles explaining the lyrics, studying every gesture, every step, every pose. Keiko bought a small second-hand stereo with powerful speakers. She would play Michael Jackson songs at maximum volume, and Yuki would stand next to the speakers, hands pressed against them, feeling the bass frequencies pulse through her body. Then she would dance, not to sound, but to sensation, to vibration, to rhythm she could feel, but never hear. By age 12, Yuki had memorized Michael Jackson's entire catalog of choreography, not by watching instructional videos or taking dance classes, just by feeling the vibrations and studying his movements. She developed her own technique, different from traditional dance, because it relied on sensing bass frequencies and pressure waves rather than hearing melodies and vocals. Her teachers at the deaf school were amazed. She's created her own form of musical interpretation. One of them told Keiko, "She's not dancing to music, she's dancing to physical sensation. It's remarkable." But Yuki had a dream that seemed impossible. She wanted to see Michael Jackson live, to feel his music not through small stereo speakers, but through the massive sound systems of a real concert, to experience those bass frequencies at their full power. Keiko knew this dream would be expensive. Concert tickets were costly. VIP tickets that would get Yuki close enough to feel the vibrations properly were nearly impossible to afford on a teacher's salary. So she saved, for 3 years. Extra tutoring jobs after school, weekend shifts, skipped meals, second-hand clothes. Every yen she could spare went into a small envelope, hidden in her dresser, labeled Yuki's Dream. When Michael Jackson announced the Dangerous World Tour would come to Tokyo in June 1993, Keiko had finally saved enough. She bought 2 VIP section tickets, positioned near the front, close to the massive speaker arrays that flanked the stage. On June 26, 1993, Keiko and Yuki arrived at the Tokyo Dome 4 hours before the concert started. Yuki wore her best dress, a simple white sundress that Keiko had sewn herself. Her long black hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked like any other excited 12-year-old girl going to see her idol. As they took their seats in the VIP section, Yuki's eyes went immediately to the massive speakers towering on either side of the stage. Each speaker stack was at least 20 feet tall, containing dozens of individual drivers designed to fill a stadium with 55,000 people with sound. For Yuki, those speakers weren't about sound. They were about vibration, about bass frequencies that would travel through the stadium structure, through the metal railings, through the floor, and into her body. That's how she would experience Michael Jackson. Not through her ears, but through every nerve ending in her body. The stadium began to fill. By the time the lights dimmed, 55,000 fans were screaming with anticipation. Yuki couldn't hear the screams, but she could feel the vibrations of thousands of feet stamping, thousands of people jumping up and down in excitement. The stadium floor beneath her feet trembled with collective energy. Then the stage exploded with pyrotechnics, even death. Yuki felt the percussion in her chest, the shock waves from the explosions traveling through the air as pressure changes her body detected. And then Michael appeared. The bass dropped. The crowd went wild, and Yuki pressed her hands flat against the metal railing in front of her seat and smiled. Really smiled for the first time in months. She could feel it. The low-frequency bass notes traveling through the stadium structure, the rhythmic pulses of the drum beat, while everyone around her sang along to jam. Yuki stood perfectly still, eyes closed, hands on the railing, letting the vibrations wash over her. Then, slowly, she began to move, not dancing exactly, more like swaying, responding to the bass frequencies only she could perceive with such clarity. Keiko watched her daughter with tears streaming down her face. 3 years of saving, 3 years of sacrifice, and it was worth it for this moment, seeing Yuki connected to music in her own unique way. Michael Jackson performed Wanna Be Startin' Something, then Human Nature, then Smooth Criminal. Yuki danced to all of them, not quite in sync with what hearing people experienced as the beat, because she was feeling the bass frequencies, which traveled slightly differently than higher-pitched sounds. Her dancing had a slight delay, a unique rhythm that was hers alone. Other people in the VIP section began to notice. Some pointed, some whispered. A security guard approached Keiko. "Ma'am, is there a problem with your daughter? She's moving strangely. Is she okay?" Keiko's English was functional from her teaching work. She is deaf. She feels music through vibrations. She is very happy. The security guard looked confused, but walked away. But he spoke into his radio, informing the team that there was a situation in the VIP section. A girl acting strangely, moving out of sync with the music. Michael Jackson was in the middle of Billie Jean when his eyes swept over the VIP section. He did this throughout every concert, making eye contact with fans, acknowledging their energy. That's when he saw her, a small girl, maybe 12 years old, wearing a white dress, long black hair in a ponytail. She was dancing, but differently than everyone around her. Her movements had a strange delay, as if she was hearing the music on a satellite delay. But more than that, her hands were pressed flat against the metal railing, and her eyes were closed, and she was swaying with an expression of pure joy. Michael continued performing, but his attention kept returning to this girl. There was something about the way she moved. During the instrumental break, Michael glanced toward his security chief, James Morton. He made a subtle gesture, pointing toward the VIP section, toward the girl. James followed Michael's gaze and nodded. He'd already been alerted about her. He assumed Michael wanted her removed if she was causing a disruption. But Michael shook his head, made a different gesture. Bring her here. James's eyes widened. Bring her to the stage? During the performance? That violated every security protocol. As Billy John ended, and the crowd erupted in applause, Michael did something unprecedented. He didn't start the next song. Instead, he walked to the front of the stage, microphone in hand, and looked directly at the girl in the white dress. "Everyone, I need a moment," Michael said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet stadium. 55,000 people fell silent, confused. Michael pointed toward the VIP section, toward Yuki. "That young lady there. Can someone bring her up here, please?" Yuki couldn't hear Michael's words, but she felt the change in the stadium's vibrations. The sudden silence, as 55,000 people stopped making noise. She opened her eyes and saw Michael Jackson pointing at her, directly at her. Keiko grabbed Yuki's hand, signing frantically. "He wants you, on stage. You." Yuki's eyes went wide with terror and disbelief. This couldn't be real. Security personnel were already moving toward them, but instead of escorting them out, they were gesturing for Yuki to follow them toward the stage. James Morton reached Yuki and Keiko first. "The girl needs to come with me. Michael wants her on stage." "She is deaf," Keiko said quickly. "She cannot hear. She does not understand." James paused. That explained the strange dancing, the delay, the hands on the railing. James pulled out a notepad and wrote quickly. "Michael Jackson wants you on stage. Come with me." Yuki read the note and looked at her mother with pure panic. Keiko signed. "Go. It's okay. Go." Still stunned, Yuki followed James toward the stage. The walk seemed to take forever. 55,000 people watched in confused silence. As Yuki approached the stage stairs, she could feel the vibrations intensifying. The massive speaker stacks were right there. The bass frequencies were stronger than anything she'd ever experienced. Michael knelt at the edge of the stage as Yuki climbed the stairs. When she reached the top and stood on the stage, facing 55,000 people, she looked absolutely terrified. Michael approached her slowly, carefully. He held up one finger, "Wait," and turned to the audience. "This young lady," Michael said into his microphone, "is deaf. She can't hear my music. She can't hear your cheers. She lives in complete silence." The stadium was absolutely quiet. "But," Michael continued, "she's been dancing all night, because even though she can't hear the music, she can feel it, through vibrations, through bass frequencies." Michael knelt down to Yuki's level. He made a gesture, pointing to his ear, then shaking his head, then pointing to his chest, nodding. Yuki understood and signed back in Japanese sign language. "Yes, I feel the music in my body." Michael didn't understand the signs, but he understood the emotion behind them. He smiled and held out his hand. Yuki took it. Michael stood and addressed the audience. "We're going to do something special. I'm going to play a song, and this young lady and I are going to dance together, not to the music you hear, but to the music she feels." Michael gestured to his band. "Give me the cleanest, deepest bass line you've got. No high frequencies, just pure low end, and make it loud." The bass player nodded and began playing a slow, deep, pulsing bass line, just the bass. No drums, no keyboards, no vocals. Yuki's eyes widened as she felt the vibrations. This was different from anything she'd experienced before. This wasn't music with bass buried underneath other instruments. This was just pure vibration. Clear, powerful, perfect. Michael placed both of his hands on the stage floor, gestured for Yuki to do the same. She knelt beside him and pressed her palms flat against the smooth stage surface, and she felt it. The bass line pulsing through the floor, traveling up her arms, into her chest, creating a rhythm her body could follow perfectly. Michael stood and began to dance. Slowly at first, simple movements, a step, a turn, a gesture, and Yuki stood and followed, watching his movements, feeling the bass pulse through her body, matching her steps to the vibrations. At first, she was tentative, careful, afraid of doing something wrong in front of 55,000 people. But as the bass line continued, as Michael encouraged her with smiles and gestures, something beautiful happened. Yuki stopped being afraid. She closed her eyes, let the vibrations guide her, and she danced, not imitating Michael, but responding to the same bass frequencies he was feeling, creating her own interpretation of the rhythm that was traveling through the stage floor and into her body. Michael saw it happening and smiled. This small deaf girl was experiencing his music exactly the way he'd intended, as pure physical sensation, as joy made tangible. He started adding more complex movements, spins, moonwalks, gestures, and Yuki followed, sometimes matching him exactly, sometimes adding her own flair, sometimes moving in ways that made perfect sense for the bass frequency she was feeling, even though they looked slightly off rhythm to the hearing audience. But then Michael did something that made the entire stadium gasp. He began singing Human Nature, but he signaled to his band to keep the bass frequency strong underneath the vocals, so Yuki could continue feeling the vibration even as he sang. And as Michael sang words Yuki couldn't hear about reaching out and touching somebody's hand, he reached out and took Yuki's hand. They stood there together. Michael Jackson and a deaf 12-year-old girl, connected not through sound but through touch, through vibration, through the universal language of rhythm that existed below hearing. 55,000 people watched in absolute silence. Many were crying. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was something sacred. When the song ended, Michael knelt beside Yuki one final time. He took off his signature black fedora and placed it on her head. It was too big, falling down over her eyes, and she smiled. The first genuinely happy smile she'd shown since stepping onto the stage. Michael made a gesture, thumbs up. "Are you okay?" Yuki nodded enthusiastically and signed back in Japanese. "Thank you, thank you. This is the best day of my life." Michael didn't understand the signs, but he understood the emotion. He hugged Yuki tightly, and the stadium erupted in thunderous applause. Yuki couldn't hear the applause, but she could feel it. The vibrations of 55,000 people stomping and clapping, creating a rumble that traveled through the stage floor. She looked out at the sea of people, all standing, all cheering for her, and she understood something profound. Music wasn't just sound. Music was connection. Music was emotion. As security, gentle now, respectful, escorted Yuki back to her mother, Keiko was sobbing. She pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, signing over and over, "You did it. You danced with Michael Jackson. You showed them music is for everyone." Michael watched Yuki return to her seat, then turned back to his 55,000 fans. He was quiet for a moment, collecting himself. "That young lady," Michael said into his microphone, his voice thick with emotion, "just taught all of us something important. Music isn't about what you hear. It's about what you feel. It's about connection. And sometimes, the people who experience it most purely are the people who experience it differently than we do." He paused, then added, "Tonight, I learned something from her, and I hope you did too." The crowd erupted in applause again. 6 months after that night at the Tokyo Dome, Keiko received a letter. It was from Michael Jackson's management team. Inside was an offer. Michael wanted to sponsor Yuki's enrollment in professional dance training, not at a school for the deaf, at a premier dance academy that would develop a specialized program to teach Yuki using her unique method of feeling music through vibrations. The letter explained that Michael had been moved by Yuki's performance and wanted to help her develop her gift. He believed she had something to teach the world about music and movement and joy. For the next several years, Yuki trained intensively. She developed what would eventually be called vibration-based dance, a technique that allowed deaf dancers to perform by feeling bass frequencies and pressure waves rather than hearing melodies. In 2001, Yuki Tanaka opened the first school for vibrational dance in Tokyo, a program that taught deaf children that they too could dance, that they too could experience music, just differently. By 2005, Yuki was performing professionally. She appeared at the Paralympic Games opening ceremony, dancing to music only she could feel, while the hearing audience listened to the soundtrack. Critics called it breathtaking, "I don't hear music," Yuki said in a sign language interview that was translated to English, "but I feel it in every cell of my body." Deaf people don't need hearing to dance. We just need to be given the chance to show people what rhythm feels like when you experience it as pure vibration. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, Yuki was performing in Paris. She was 28 years old and one of the world's most respected dancers. When she learned of Michael's death, she canceled her performance and sat in silence for 24 hours, feeling grief in the only way she knew, as a physical sensation in her chest. At one of Michael's memorial services, Yuki was invited to perform a tribute. She danced to Human Nature, the song Michael had sung while dancing with her that night in Tokyo. The audio was broadcast normally for the hearing audience, but the bass frequencies were amplified so that deaf audience members could experience the performance the way Yuki experienced it. There wasn't a dry eye in the venue, because watching Yuki dance, graceful, powerful, perfectly in rhythm with music she couldn't hear, was watching Michael Jackson's legacy come to life. Yuki still has Michael's fedora. She keeps it in a temperature-controlled case in her Tokyo apartment. She doesn't wear it, it's too precious. But sometimes when she's struggling, she opens the case and looks at it and remembers a night when the King of Pop stopped his concert to dance with a deaf girl, when 55,000 people learned that music isn't just sound. Today, Yuki Tanaka is 43 years old. She runs multiple schools, teaching vibration-based dance to deaf children across Asia. She's published books about her technique. She's advised major concert venues on how to make performances more accessible to deaf audiences. And she travels the world sharing her message. Music isn't something you hear with your ears, it's something you feel with your entire being. I've never heard a single note of music in my entire life, but I felt music in ways that changed me forever, because Michael Jackson stopped his concert and said she's different, but that doesn't mean she can't dance. He gave me permission to experience joy the only way I could. The story of Michael Jackson and Yuki Tanaka is a reminder that art transcends the limits we place on it, that music isn't just organized sound, it's organized energy, emotion, rhythm, and connection. On June 26, 1993, Michael Jackson could have ignored the deaf girl dancing strangely in his VIP section, but Michael saw something others missed. Someone experiencing his music in its purest form. And by inviting Yuki onto that stage, Michael gave her and everyone watching permission to understand that there is no wrong way to feel joy. Sometimes the most beautiful music happens in silence. Sometimes the most powerful performances are the ones where words and sound fall away, leaving only connection. On that night in Tokyo, 55,000 people learned what Yuki Tanaka had always known. Music lives in places hearing people never think to look. Michael Jackson didn't just give a concert that night. He gave millions a new understanding of what music really is. It's not sound, it's connection, it's joy. Yuki Tanaka couldn't hear a single note Michael Jackson sang, but she felt his music more deeply than anyone else in that stadium. And in 8 minutes on a stage in Tokyo, she taught the world that being different isn't a limitation. It's just another way of experiencing beauty. And sometimes, that different way is the most beautiful way of all.